Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to set up, bring in some RestAPI data using the AngularJS framework that we set up in the previous video, going against data stored in the SharePoint list. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So as you know, we dropped in this latest blog and we're missing images and all this other good stuff. So I think the one thing we probably should do is to go ahead and set up very similar to what we've done in our services file. How we set up the get method to bring in the template so that way we can dynamically load the template URL. And that sets us up to use a site collection, which is going to be important. Let's do something very similar to bring in the images. So if we go ahead to get template, let's just rename this to get images URL. And basically this is going to be to the directory that's stored in that design folder. And we don't need any parameters here. This is just going to be the root of our site collection. Job portal, let's just confirm the path here. So job site style library, job portal, design, images. And then that's all style library, job portal, design, images. And that's going to give us access to all the photos that we kind of use in the out of the box template. All right, well, the template from the designer. Okay, we'd separate these by comma because all of these are different properties within the object that's returned. Okay, so that's going to be that. So that's the images directory. So get images, save that off. Let's go ahead into our component. And then here for the job latest, the latest blog component, what we want to do is set a property that we can leverage in the view to where we can tell it where the images are. So just put images URL, and then we just set that equal to service.getImages URL. No parameters, and then that's that. Okay. So now we have this images URL. Let me just save this all. And let's go into this template now. And then actually we can leverage this to specify the different, for the different images, we can specify the root directory. So blog latest, this is this guy. And then this images here, we just, now because we're going to use a token to bring in that dynamic variable for the images directory, we actually have to use the ng source on this one. And the image tag has this, and then the href anchor tags have that as well. So if you're dynamically modifying the source URL, we have to do the leverage the token for that. So here we just do a double curly brace VM to represent the controller, and then images URL. And then we have to put did we end up with a slash? I think we did. Let's see. Yeah, so we end up with a slash. Should we do that? Or should we put the slash in the URL? Yeah, let's put the slash in when we actually use it. All right, so where are we? Yeah, so just put a slash there. It looks a little bit cleaner, right? All right, so that's going to be the job JPEG for the blog JPEG for that guy. And let's just copy this. And anywhere else we need to leverage it, let's just drop it in. Oh, this is already bringing the images. You know what? That's what we need to do. We have to fix that for the other one, or else we get images. All right, so that's that. That one looks good. That one looks good. How many? I think we have. Oh, we only have 3. Yeah, so we update all 3 manually. I was going to jump into a find and replace, but I think we can handle 3. All right, and this is the same blog, JPEG. These are just placeholders, but at least with this will make it dynamic to where we don't have to hard code it, and we don't have to replace it right away. And then now we have something in our back pocket that we can leverage to bring in these images dynamically based on the site collection. Okay, so let's go ahead and publish this out. I do not have an instance of the style library in Windows Explorer view, so let's go ahead and do that now. Where is it? Style library. This over here. Open Explorer. I think I'm gonna get prompted for a password. Go ahead and copy this off. All right, so that's good. Now let's go back into our project and let's go ahead and publish this out. And hopefully, if we've done everything correctly, we should be able to see the images pop in. So we need the services, we need the component, and we need the publish out the blog template, HTML template. All right. All right, looks like everything made it up. Let's just go hit refresh here. There we go. Oh, it looked like we missed one, so we did 3 of the 4. There's another one in here somewhere. Just go ahead and move this down. Where are we? Oh, here we go. So let's just copy this whole guy out and then paste it in here. Okay, so now that's done. That was just in the template, so let's just push that out. Okay, so what we've done in the last video, we actually dropped this into the home page layout. And ideally, we don't want this here, right? So that was just for testing. So let's go ahead and pull this guy out. And let's say the home page layout that way without the blog latest tag. And the cool thing about this model is that, let's get rid of this too, this hello Deshaun. This is when we were just kind of testing out that we were bringing in rich text data. Let's just publish this out. We wanted to get this page layout to start shaping up, looking like the real layout, the real design that we're actually going to move forward with. Okay, so let's go here, hit refresh. Now this latest blog guy should disappear, which it did. And now we can go into edit mode for this page and drop this guy in as we're going to do with a web part. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and clear this out. This is all just coming in the page contents area. This is hard coded, so we have to find that and clear that out. What's this? Is this a web part? What is this? Yeah, this is a web part. So let's go ahead and delete this guy. Again, we're just going through trying to clean all this up. Okay, so now let's add in a script editor web part. And what this is going to allow us to do is to leverage our tags that we're creating so far and treat them as web parts. And then eventually we're going to start adding parameters to where we can control each instance of these. So the first thing we want to do is do a script editor. Just drop this in. And then edit snippet. And then actually the one that I just copied from or cut from the page layout, I'm gonna paste that in. So our same naming convention for our custom tag, this is what we want to drop in. And if you hit insert, I think you have to do published for it to pop up. All right, so there it is. So now we just drop this guy in as a web part. And obviously we can come in here and we can add many instances of this, very similar to a custom web part or any out-of-the-box web part, just leveraging the script editor. So if we needed 2 of these, you just go back to the script editor. And then all I'm gonna do is just paste this guy in again. All right, so this is how you can leverage them as web parts. And then again, just go up here and publish this guy. So now we should have 2 instances, right? And as far as responsive design, this still should remain true. This thing is responding as expected, and we're listed out. So I think we're good, okay? All right, so now that we have, oh, what's that? Okay, that was weird. I hit some weird funky state to where it was not lining up correctly, but Once you adjust the browser, it's seem to pop back into place. So I'm not going to worry about that for now. Okay, so now that we have this guy here, what I want to do, I actually want to move forward with dropping in the job categories, and then we can get into our REST API piece of this particular video. So in order to bring in the, did we do browse jobs? So this would be jobs categories right here. Yeah, this looks like it. So actually, let's rename this. So we got jobs featured, and then we have jobs category. Let's rename this to the correct name, jobs category. And we're going to, categories, plural. And we're going to make these types of mistakes initially, because as we dig deeper, we're going to learn that what things should be into a nice model. And that's fine. So, you have that flexibility to rename these things. Just remember that as you're renaming them and you do the publishing, the old file still remains. So we have to go out there, and we talked about that, manually delete those. So because we renamed the template name here, let's go into our component. Oh, we didn't build one for job categories. So, okay, so we're good. So let's just copy this guy, this component, create another one called for the job categories. So JP job categories. And then that's going to point to our jobs categories template. That's fine to get images here. So that way we do have a tag for that. So images URL. So let's go into job categories and see if we even need that. I don't think we need that. No, we don't need that for now. So we can actually remove that from our component, keep things clean. And if we need it, we know where to copy and paste it from. Okay. So this should give us our job categories. Now, if I want to represent this in a script editor, the web part, what I want to do is, what did I do? I renamed this guy. So let's go ahead and push this up. And we added a component. So let's push this up. So that way it's available to us in SharePoint. So now what I want to do is go into this page here. So instead of having two of these latest blogs, let's just bring in the job categories. And all I have to do is go in here and edit snippet and then update this to job categories tag. It's a little bit manual, but it's clean, right? So we're not dealing with HTML directly. We're just adding in the HTML tag, which is pretty straightforward. And then we do insert, and it's one of those things where you either have to, let me do a save and keep editing to see if I can get it to pop up that way. There we go. All right, so now we have our job. So the title is browse jobs, right? But we understand that these are categories for the different jobs. And obviously this is still hard coded. So let's make this dynamic. So let's go ahead and publish this guy out. I think we're okay with editing this for now. And if we look at this, this is more of a architecture or technical design piece right here, to where if we look at this, basically this is really straightforward. So these are not icons, right? This is using the font awesome icon. So these are not images icons. It's just coming from the font awesome library. So we're going to need a font awesome library. And basically, if you're familiar with font awesome, you know that this is just referencing a class name. It's not an actual image that we need to bring in. So we need a column that's going to allow us to bring in the font awesome class name. And of course, there's probably like 800 of these, right? So we're not going to account for everything, but we wanted to make it in a way to where we can add to them as we need them. But then again, if we're using one already that exists, then we want to be able to allow the content managers to be able to select them. So we don't want, every time they need to use like the gavel, for example, that they have to go in and type that in. That should be part of a list. So in my mind, I'm thinking what we're gonna do is there's a couple ways that you can do this. Obviously, I would say it's some type of drop down list so that you have lookup, you have choice, and you have the term store, right, as those options. I'm leaning towards the choice, and that's for two reasons. One, I think the actual list itself may be a little bit more cumbersome to manage, especially for something as simple as this. But then again, you could have the argument could be say, hey, I can have one central list for all my fun, awesome icons, and then I can have my users just, everywhere I need it, I can just reference that one list. And as we need to make it dynamic, I can offer it one list, and that's true. The problem with that is that for, say, for example, if this is going to span across many departments, you have to give everyone access to that list to make those updates. Or there is a workflow or an email or request to say, hey, I want to use this suitcase icon. Can you please add it to the list? So that can be cumbersome, right? I think we're just creating extra maintenance that's really not needed for something that's low level as this. So I like the choice because the choice we can enable allow them to add submissions, right? So if it's not in the drop down, they can add it and you can get that uniquely per department. The problem with that approach is that for each sub site, they're going to have their own SEP. You're not sharing those components of there, which kind of leads us to the term store option. Now, the term store option is probably the best of both scenarios, to where you allow them to do those entries dynamically, because no one's going to go out there and preload all 800 icons, right? And then I think for most users, it doesn't make sense because you really want to see what these things look like before you select them. So only having them by the name is not going to be that useful. You want to see what the icon, so really looking which icon it looks like. That's how you really want to select these guys. But the term store, if you do like an open term set, that allows you to do what we wanted to do. So we can start with a finite list, and then we can also have our content managers as they need them. Like say for example, if the suitcase is not part of that list, they can add it, and once they add it, it's available to everyone else. So when they're in another department, say, oh, well, here's the suitcase one, they can add it. The only problem though, and this is more of a SharePoint 2013 versus 2016, in the REST API, when you're dealing with managed metadata columns, it doesn't, you have to do a double call to get that data out. That's what I'm seeing so far. In 2016, I think they fixed it to where those columns right along with any REST API requests, and you're able to get everything in a single call. You don't have to do double calls for that. So if we go with managed metadata in this scenario, we either one have to build a custom service just for this piece, which would else, if we didn't use that column, could be out of the box REST API. So we add additional infrastructure just because we decided to use a managed metadata column versus a choice. Or if you wanted to do everything REST API and didn't want to spin up that additional infrastructure, every call to this guy would be a double call. One to get the list items, and you would get like the title, you would get the sort order. That's another thing we're going to add. And then you would just get the ID of the term set term of the term that's actually being used to represent the column. Then you have to make another call with that ID to actually get the true value. So it's a pain in the butt. So what we're going to do, and again, that's a 2013 thing, and for 2016, the REST API seems to be more in tune to what we expect. So I say all that to say this is that we're going to use the choice column. So let's go ahead and build this list. So when we go to site columns, the first thing we're going to do is just do a custom list. And we're just going to call this job categories. And be careful with that list name for the title for the name. You don't want any spaces. So, and this is just a rule of thumb, and anything that we build, try to, if you can, do not use spaces, right? These, and the title is, and we'll talk about this in the code, becomes a little bit fragile because if the content manager comes in and rename this, our REST API call breaks because it uses the display name to get this, unfortunately. But anytime we create columns or anything like that stuff, we're going to minimize the space for the internal names. So now what we need to do, we need to actually go and create the actual columns for the icons and for the sort order, because we want to have more control over how these display. I don't want to create these on the list itself. And we can talk about, there could be also an argument like, should we be using content types versus columns directly on the list? For now, let's just stick with I'm a forego the content types for now, but I am going to create the columns at the site collection level using the site columns at the site collection. So if I go into site columns, we want to create here. Again, let's not put any spaces in here. And I'm okay using camel case. So I'm gonna prefix everything that we customize with JP to represent our portal, our custom solution. And we want a job categories field site column, right? So JP job categories. This is going to be a choice column, right? And we want to create a job portal group to store all these like columns in. And for the choice options, no, I'm sorry. This is icons. So let's just do JP icons for this. Very simple name. And the cool thing about the columns is that this has both an internal name and display name. So we can change this, once we create this guy, we can change the display name without affecting the REST API calls because it will use the internal name. So job portal, we put this guy here, and then for icons, let's just start this guy with, actually I have a list here. So what I've done with my list, and I'm about to drop in here, I actually went ahead and copied or captured all of the icons that are currently used in the design for this area, and we'll just drop them here. Make that a drop down, and let's just make the default desktop, that's fine. Or we can, just make it empty for now. And that way, if you want to make it require, you can do that, and that will force them to think about what they want to select. All right, so everything else looks good. Choice column, custom group. There's our entries we blanked out, and then we're going to hit OK. All right. The next thing we want to do is the sort order. Now, the way I do sort order is JP sort order. I give them a listing, right? So I give them a drop-down option. And for this guy, we just did 1 through 20. And I want this to default to 20. Now, the reason for this is that, one, with the sort order, you want this drop down so that way you're consistent with your numbering. You don't have someone come in and put 1, 2, 3, 4, or if they want to get creative, put ABC, whatever, right? So we want to force this ordering. And we cap it at 20, but because this is a choice column, they can manage this at the list level. So if they need 50 or whatever the case may be, or if they want to shrink this to 10, they can do that at the list level. This default value, though, I usually do the highest number. And the reason for that is that if the content manager comes in and they establish, say, for example, they start off with 10 items, and they do the sort order for those 10, and then when they go add an item, they don't want to mess up that predefined sort order because maybe those are the key ones that they want on top. Anything after that, they're okay with those just kind of following the line. So if you start out with a 20, the new ones just kind of fall in line underneath the predefined one, and every time a new one's added, they don't have to go through and readjust it. They only have to readjust it if they actually absolutely need to. So again, you just kind of cut down on the maintenance, and you make this feature a lot easier to use by just something as simple as defaulting that sort order to the highest number to where new items do not disrupt an already sorted list of items. So just again, one of those things that you just kind of pick up from experience and feedback, from when you've done this before. Okay, so we want to again put this in our existing group. Go ahead and hit OK here. And now let's go back to our custom list, which is job categories and settings, add existing. Again, because everything's in our custom group, just bring these two guys in. All right, so now if we do new item, we should be good. So title, here's our icons, and then a sort order. So let's see if we can make this guy, the icon. So for this particular instance, the icon is important and should be required. So let's go ahead and make that required. Again, I'm making this required only at the list level. Again, so if you set these, if you configure these guys correctly at the site column level, you get a lot more flexibility with leveraging that centralized location of this type of data, but still give them the flexibility to turn things on or off or make the needed adjustments at the list level. So JP icons from a user perspective, now I can go in here and customize the display name to where it makes sense. So I can just say category icon. Again, because now we're looking at this in the context of a job category, this makes sense. And then display order. Okay. Again, just trying to make this make sense for the content managers as you're looking at this. It would be pretty straightforward. Okay, so what do we have? Let's do information technology, and I'm only going to technology. I'm only going to do a couple of these, and I don't know, tags, desktop, maybe desktop, and this should be one. And then I'm gonna go through and add another one. So let me pause the video, get these added, so that way we're not burning minutes just watching me do some data entry. Okay, so I went ahead and loaded these guys up, and this is represented for the most part, most of the names that are used in the design, the categories, and I just randomly picked a display order, so that way we kind of mix it up a bit. So now what we want to do, let's see what this list looks like using the out-of-the-box REST API. I use a plugin in Chrome called Yark, which is yet another REST API client. There's tons of them out there, okay? And basically what you want to do is, and I'm just assuming that you're somewhat familiar on the REST API calls. If not, let's go ahead and walk through this really quick. So basically, I just copy the URL to the list, which I really don't need, but it helps. And I'm going to inject some, just the URL here. So everything to get the REST API starts with _API /web/list. So this is going to give me the current web, which is based on this URL piece right here, and then go into the APIs, the REST API for that particular web. And so, okay, for the web, give me all the lists and get this one particular list by title. So get by title. You put all this in single quotes, and that's why I copy that off so the title name is there. I don't have to worry about screwing it up. So instead of all items, you just do /items, and of course you don't need the ASPX or anything like that. So now so this is going to be a get method. You have all these other options. I think mostly what you would use, I would say 80% of your commands would be get. The other 10 or 20% would probably be post. I personally haven't used the put or patch pieces yet. Those are mostly for updates to existing items, and then the delete. But I would say 80 to 85% would be get commands, because most of the time is, believe it or not, most of our solutions are going to be read only. Okay, so once we have this get, here's the payload option. If we were doing a post, this would be any of the JSON or parameters that we need to pass in the post request, but that's not pertaining to us for right now. And then I already have several of these headers set up. Once you get a good one, you want to save it. So basically, the one that we're using for this one is the application /JSON /OData equals verbose. If you need to, go ahead and pause the video so you can capture that. You only need one of these. I already have one, so I just show you how to select it. And then what you do here is just do a send request, and it takes all that information and pass it over to SharePoint. Here at the bottom, this is going to be our REST API. In 2013, this is going to be very noisy because we have OData equals verbose. So it has all the metadata needed for additional references to get additional information from this collection of items that it is returning. We don't need that for now. It's actually a lot of noise. Unfortunately, you have to skip over all of this to get to the meat of it. And this is going to be the meat of our list information. So here you have the title for that item. We have the icon that we selected for the item. It's all primed and ready to go. And then you have the actual sort order. And then we get some additional information as far as like the date created, the who created it, modified by, created by, all this other good stuff. Okay. So now the trick is, okay, how do we get this model into Angular to where we can pull this information out? So let's put a bookmark in here now. Let's pop right back into our project. And when we're in the project, let's go into our services layer. And again, this is going to be, if we set this up correctly, we want to, the goal is to set this up to where we can get a lot of reusability, and any heavy lifting, let's try to encapsulate that, do that once, and then leverage those repeatable methods when and where possible. I'm gonna just do a Control KD just to get everything formatted, looking nice. And I'm trying to think of the best way to go about this. If I should, you know what, let me just build this the way that I have it, and then I'll explain bits and pieces of it along the way. So if you're familiar with jQuery, you know that to make an AJAX call, there is a AJAX command, and basically in that AJAX command, you have to pass in the header, very similar to what we did in this plugin. So basically, for any framework that you use, either be jQuery, Angular, React, or whatever the case may be, you're going to have a scenario to where you have to specify, this is what we call the endpoint, which is just very similar to a URL. And then you have to specify the header type, right? And then the command, if it's get, post, or whatever. And then once you set that up to make the request, the response back is going to be the JSON. And then, so the second piece of that is how do you deal with the JSON that's returned, and then how you bind that to the HTML to get that displaying nicely within the HTML. Okay, so in order to do this, let's get back to the Angular piece. So what I've done is that I just created the git config, because what this is going to entail, the object needed to make the request for GET requests within SharePoint. So in the headers property, I'm going to pass in the object, the accept command. And this is where we do our application JSON and set our verbose equals to, I'm sorry, OData equals to verbose. OData equals verbose, right? And this is going to be standard stuff, and it's going to be reusable. So anytime we need to get to get data from a SharePoint list using out-of-the-box REST API, we're going to have to pass this guy. And as we have something very similar, we actually pass the same guy to our custom REST API, because this just tells you to return JSON versus XML. And any OData or metadata that the service provider provides to say, okay, here are additional commands you can call to get further detail on this command set, you can do OData equals verbose. In our custom API, we're not going to add metadata, so we're just going to, even if this is passed, we're just going to ignore it, but this piece right here is critical. Okay, so that's the command. Now the next thing we want to do, and if you look at, again, anything above this return object is going to be private, and these are going to be reusable in our business layer, which is everything in the middle of this return object. We consider that the business. So as a private method, repeatable, it's going to be get SP list items, or get SP items, right? I'm just careful with using the word list, because this command is going to work for both list items and document libraries, right? So from an API, we all know that those are probably 90% the same. The only delta is when we want to get URLs, so actual files that are stored in document libraries. So what we're going to do is just call this guy, this would be a function. And when you call this guy, you're going to pass in the endpoint, which is the URL to the REST API call. And we're going to return a promise, because we're actually going to go ahead and do our HTTP call. This is the format for Angular to get the data and in so git config. Let me just type this out, then I'll explain the different pieces. I'm actually looking at another window and make sure I get the syntax right. So D curly braces and that, and then the meat, and then this guy you just return D dot, and this is tricky. I'll explain this in a little bit. And if you get caught up with, and this is why you don't want to do this each and every call, right? Because this will catch you up. I promise you, this will catch you up. Just dealing with the return JSON and getting right to the right array, right? Because these are like objects array, objects array, objects array, that type of deal. That's just a standard format of JSON. In SharePoint, things can get pretty deep or things can get pretty shallow, and it really depends on the type of data that you're going after. So when we go after building the navigation REST API to get the top nav, right, this is going to look a little bit different. And if we wanted to get one particular item, so a SP list item, either it be a item that represents a list item in a data item in a list, or item in a document library, this return type looks a little bit different. But because we're getting a collection of items, again, this could be documents or items in the list, this will remain the same, again, which making this point of having this guy in a private zone to where it can be reused in our business layer that much more important. Now, let me explain this really quick. So you're probably already familiar with the jQuery Ajax method of how to get this. This guy right here just says this is the get command. So I think if you do a dot, you get real IntelliSense on all the other options, or not. No, that doesn't look right. Okay, so you will have to look this up for the HTTP module, and you can see how it's getting highlighted here because we're bringing that in. We're able to use that, and then this is the get. This would be get, post, or delete, or whatever the case may be for the different options. Here you pass in the endpoint because this is reusable. We just want that to be a parameter. And then the get config, this is where I'm referencing this guy. If I had another one for when we do post request, this will be a content type, and we have to do application and some other good stuff here to represent the headers for post request. But for gets, this is going to be all the same. And then this request here will actually go and get the data, but because it's a promise, that's what we have to do, this funky syntax, the then, and then a anonymous function here, and then the actual data that's going to be returned. So if you look into this guy here, I just want to highlight some key pieces, so that way if you're interacting with another JSON request and the format of the JSON is different, you know where to kind of pick it up. So we pass in the, let me see if I can do this split screen. We pass in the D parameter. And basically, this is just this can be any name. I mean, you can name this Deshaun, you can name this dog, cat, or whatever the case may be. But basically says, okay, I'm gonna get this promise. Once I get the promise, hydrate into this object here. And that way on my return, we will see where things get a little bit more complex, to where we want to inject that JSON and manipulate a little bit before we return it back to the component. But so this is where you represent the data that's returned back. So that's the D parameter. Now this data one, you got me on this one. I have no idea, but I just know that this data object here, and I think you have to name it data, represents this top object here in the JSON. So you see that open curly brace that goes all the way down to the very end, to where that's the curly brace. So everything in here is just inside of this object. So that curly brace so that object is represented with this data here. And then you have the D, which is the property. That's where we're getting this guy from. And then you have the results, which is off another property off that object, which is where we're getting this guy from. And then within this results array, it's an array of all the objects that we need. Okay. Again, this is going to be repeatable anytime that you need to get SharePoint lists. So that's why we want to encapsulate that into a private method. Now, the fun part. The cool thing is this is done one-time setup and you're good to go. You can reuse it n number of times as we need it. Now what we want to do is go ahead and get the actual job category. So now we want to call this, let's say get job categories. And this is a function. And the parameter, let's leave this parameter less for now, and we'll build up to that. And what we want to do, we just want to do a return, and we want to call our private method get SP list items, and we want to pass in a URL. Let's do that. Let's just define the URL here, or endpoint. Let's just set this blank for now, and we'll talk about what that should be. So let's just pass in the URL, right? That's the REST API. I'm sorry, that's the endpoint that this function is expecting. This too is a promise, right? So we have to then function. Get used to the syntax because you're going to use this all over the place, okay? We want to represent the promise object there, and then we just want to return the promise to the component. And basically that's it. So this is very pass-through, right? So all the plumbing and all the syntax and all the other stuff that's needed for SharePoint data is going to be here. This URL is going to be custom based on the business logic. So this is more of a business layer type deal, and we're going to formulate this here in a bit. And this is the, you make a promise. This is the special syntax you need to deal with the promises. Promise data is represented there, and you return that back. Right? What's a promise and all this other good stuff? You probably have to do a Google search on that. It's just beyond the scope of this project, but this video. But this is how you deal with them. And anytime you're doing AJAX calls, you're going to deal with a promise object because that's something that you have to wait on, but you don't want to make your code stop at this point. You want it to continue executing. Okay, in a nutshell, that's what it is. Okay, so that's that. Now let's go ahead and pass and set up our URL. So in our URL, let's go back to our our plugin, and we want to copy this guy here. Okay, and let's go back to our project. And this is what our request looks like when we're going to get the jobs category data, right? Obviously, we want to make this more dynamic, and we already have a fix for that. So this is going to be our site URL. So we just want to go ahead and concatenate that piece. And this is going to be our API web list data, and let's just end the quotes here. And for the most part, that's it. Right, so we have the dynamic URL. This says, okay, for the site collection, because this list lives at the site collection level, aka root web. And if we had something to where we need the current web, then we would just have to go up here and then modify this to get the current web, which is very simple, right? So we just do var underscore web URL, which is the current web, and then set that equal to this guy. And as we saw in the previous video, instead of doing the site URL, I think it's web URL. I'll have to look it up. Look this up to confirm. I'm gonna do web server relative URL. I'm gonna guess on that, but just look that up to confirm that's a true property. And then you just end that there. So if this list, so if you had a site collection and your several subwebs deep, instead of having to try to figure that out, just do that. This guy here, this page context, which is our best friend, is going to pass in the current web URL. We leverage that there. Everything in the API call will remain the same, assuming that you have a job category list within that current web. Okay, so let's go ahead. That's how you solve that. So that's going to be a site collection level, and that's going to return this back. Now, to use this guy in the component, let me just save this all. Switch over to our component. Job categories. And we want to set this into an array. And we're just going to call this array items. And SVC dot, and then the, oh, what happened? Oops, hitting the wrong key. All right, get job categories. Now, because this is a promise, now, this is where I'm getting confused. I thought, right, that we would be able to, in previous versions of AngularJS, these types of local variables were able to deal with promises, and you did not have to do what I'm about to do to deal with a promise and have the then syntax and all this other good stuff. But for some odd reason, I couldn't get I could not get this to work. Now I can set these different variables here equal to the return value of this particular function because this is not dealing with a promise, right? All this data is being extracted from that underscore page, or it's hard coded, or it's text or whatever. So there's no promise data. There's no AJAX call to get this data. So we're not dealing with the promise object. But for this guy here, we are dealing with a promise object, and I'm gonna just go with this syntax. Again, this is then, and you have to learn this because it's all over the place. D curly brace, and then in the meat of that, now I can set this guy items equal to the D variable again, which I define here. If you want to call it F, we can call it F, just to mix it up a bit, and you understand that there's no way, there's no right or wrong way of defining that as long as you're consistent. The parameter you use it here equals to the control items. All right, so now this is in there, and we should be able to leverage this in the template. So now let's go to our template, job categories. And this is where we get into a lot of Angular isms. So basically, if we're looking at this guy, we're going to spit, this is the repeatable chunk of HTML. And right now, the designer have these hard-coded in. I think it's 6 of them just to kind of show a collection. So what we want to do is just take one of these and convert it to a dynamic piece, right? I have to look at 2 of them to see which parts are repeatable and which parts are unique for that particular job category. So the URL is going to be unique because, obviously when they click on this, they want to go to the details of that particular category. It seems like the matter is consistent, and it seems like the class for the framework is consistent. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to put an ng repeat here, and this is kind of counterintuitive because whatever you want to repeat, unlike a for each loop where the repeat section is in the body of it, for an ng repeat, which is very similar to a for each loop, you actually have to put this on the starting node that you want repeated. So we want this anchor tag and everything within it to be repeated. So we do ng repeat and item in vm dot items, right? Which is our collection that we collected, that we define. So this is our array that we define in a component. And then basically what we want to do is spit out the properties of the JSON. So in this case, this would be title. That's going to be our title. And then these are our icons. And you notice that in our icon names, let's just switch back to it. In our icon name, we don't do the FA-FA or anything like that. We just do the meat part of the FA. So we want to define, just put that piece of it in. And basically, this is just going to be replacing this guy with item dot, and you're probably wondering, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing a good job explaining this, where I'm getting these property names from. And basically, these are the internal names for your site columns. So if you go back to the list setting, and we look at any one of those site columns, so if I want to spit out the category icon, we rename the display name to this, but the internal name remains the same. And if you look at the URL, wherever the field value is set to in the query string parameter, that's the name that you can expect this property to be in the JSON. So for this guy, it's going to be JP icons, just like that. Okay. For title, I kind of cheated a little bit because I know title is always going to be the title being the default site column on the property. So if I click on title, you see that that's the title there. It is case sensitive, and obviously you have to get the spelling and all this other good stuff right. But again, for best practices, because when we named the column and when we did the internal name, we were certain not to use any special characters or spaces, and that's what is going to give us a clean name in our in our code. Okay, so let's bounce back here. All right, so there's the icon, there's the title, and everything should be repeating now. Okay, let's test this out and see if we, with all of our changes, are going to get this right on the first run. I'm sure there's going to be an issue, and we're going to get a chance to troubleshoot together. All right, so let's push up the jobs, push up components, let's push up services. I think that's the scope of our change is publish selected. And you notice that we replace, we made this chunk of HTML dynamic. And obviously we're going to get all the static stuff too. But once we get this working, we can go in and comment these out. Let's get this working first. And I always, but this is the critical piece of using Chrome. Okay, so we have an empty guy here. Something went wrong. Now we can leverage Chrome to go into the developer tools and see exactly what's going on. The first thing I go is look at the console. It doesn't like the config file. Oh, look at that. This is actually it. It looks like it doesn't like the config file, but that looks fine. I'm looking at the URL, and a double whack there is what's killing us. Okay, so let's go back here. And that's defining our services, right? Because, so let's just start. Oh, okay, so this site URL is going to start with a slash. So we had a double slash there. Something as simple as that would kill you, right? It is unfortunate, but if you have the right tools, you can sniff these things out pretty quickly. All right, so we fixed that. We publish it up. Now console looks clean. All right, so this looks not formatted correctly. All right, so what do? But this is cool though. I mean, we actually have the data, but we're losing on the formatting. Okay, so this is a template guy, right? So we actually have the data spitting that out. I'm actually surprised. I think we got further along than I anticipated on the first go. So let's look at, do we not have our repeats correctly? I think we need to repeat at the matter level, right? So that's simple. So let's just move this attribute from the anchor tag up to this tag, inside, right? And let's try this out. So we just go to jobs category, push it up, publish, go back to the browser, hit refresh. Yeah, it seems like all those guys were all in the same. All right, so this is looking a little better. Oh, Deshaun, come on. We need to repeat all of this. Duh. This is the repeatable. Sorry. We need to repeat all of this. So this entire tag needs to be repeated. Okay. All right, so let's move this up to the entire tag. Sorry, I had a meltdown there. Okay. All right, so whatever's repeated here, this is obvious where it needs to be repeated. Okay, so we need to repeat this guy here. Let's go ahead and publish this up. And now we should get what we're looking for. Hit refresh. All right, now we're cooking with hot grease. All right, so this looks, and you compare, and that's another reason why I wanted to keep the hard-coded stuff, is that now we have Angular dynamically bringing these in. This information technology is dynamic, and oh, we use that. So this bank went and we started to repeat it. And so this bank is dynamic and this bank is static. And if you hover over the two, they should look exactly the same. And that's the cool thing with this model, right? We didn't have to adjust the HTML or move the HTML and convert it over to JavaScript strings and all this other stuff where we can fat finger it and disrupt something. We really just decorated the existing markup with our ng repeat piece, and that allowed us to easily integrate that and get, separate the design from the functionality. And if the designer comes back and say, oh, I want to change this to boom, 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 okay, fine, no problem. We just figure out where we need to put our tags. The designer, owns all the markup. That's a clear separation. And we just need to put our, let's put a little space there. We just need to put our Angular syntax where things need to go. Okay. So, all right. So what we need to do here, let's go ahead and comment this out. So I'm gonna just highlight this chunk. That's all the hard-coded HTML stuff. Let's go ahead and push this up. And now we should get our dynamic pieces of this. This took a little bit longer initially to set up because we had to set up our plumbing for our services piece. But now, I mean, for all the other stuff, because the plumbing is there, we should be able to come in here and start stamping these out. There's two things I want to change here. One, we want to control the ordering of this. And right now we're kind of ignoring the ordering. So let's take a look at the list again. And in our JSON, we need to specify which order these guys should come in. So what I'm going to do, oops, I just went back to the same place. Let's go into site settings and let's look at a particular column, the display order column. And we want to order by this, right? So I'm just coming up here to get the internal name, so I'm copying that. Let's go to our services where we actually make this call. And to order this guy is really as simple as query string parameter. Here's the OData syntax. Order by equals, and then you specify which column you want to order by. By default, this is going to be in ascending order. If you wanted this to be descending, I believe this is space.desc for descending. But we're gonna we need ascending, so we're just gonna let this guy go as such. Hit publish. Come back. Hit refresh. Okay, and we should be good, right? We don't know if it's ordering, right? So let's play around with it. So let's pop this guy open in a new tab. So that way we can bounce between what's going on behind the scenes and what's actually being displayed. Let's go to this list and let's just go into edit mode here. So if we sort this by display order, the expectation is that we get information technology, webmaster, business, yada, 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 information, website, business. Okay, still not convinced. So let's go ahead and shuffle things up a little bit. Let's make banking first. Let's make information technology 6. And let's make sales second. Right? And oops. Hope I didn't screw things up. All right, banking, sales. Okay, so now if we go back here, hit refresh. Look at that. Banking, sales. Where's our sales icon? And where's our sales icon? Were we always missing the sales icon? I think so. All right, let's see what this sales icon is set to. Okay, sales icon is set to chart. Is that not the right name? Let's look at our HTML. What do you have for sales? Sales and marketing should be, bar chart. Okay, no harm, no foul. All right, so let's update. I used the wrong icon name for this. So let's update this guy to bar-chart. No, okay. Oh, we don't have this set up. We don't have this set up to allow entries. Okay, let's fix that. So go into the list settings here, category icons, allow fill-in choices. Okay, hit OK there, and then also come up here and let's fix it here. And there's a couple ways you can do that. So as you discover new icons that you want to reuse or make usable, just come in here and update the choice. Again, this is not going to affect, this is one of those guys that it doesn't affect the site column at the site collection level. It just affects this instance of the site column here. Okay, hit OK there. Go back to the category. Because we're using the choice column, anytime that we use the old value, those do not automatically get updated. So we have to go in there manually. Again, another pitfall for using choice versus term store. Sales, bar chart. All right, go back here, refresh. All right, there we go. Simple as that. Right, and then to obviously you can do a search on Font Awesome to see what other icon options you have, right? So any other icon options you have will be available to you. Now to understand, and here's one thing that you probably want to do. You probably want to update this version of Font Awesome, because if we click in this guy here, where we actually using the Font Awesome class name, and then scroll down to where you see the Font Awesome CSS library, click on that guy. It actually gives you the version number right here in the tag here, right? So yeah, so if you want to use the latest and greatest, because if you do a Google search on Font Awesome icons, I think the current one is like version 5.1 or 5.06 or something like that. And so, you know, the thing about the latest version is, and they're doing a couple of changes here. Anything that's in bold, that's free. Anything that's grayed out, you have to have the pro licensing for that. So you can filter on the free ones here. But say, for example, if you want to use Anchor, right, you can just come in here, test it out, and see if Anchor is even part of your version of the library. But if there's an icon that you really want to use that's not available, then oh, Anchor's there. That's not available, then you probably want to upgrade your update your Font Awesome library. Okay. All right. So we added the sort order there. We corrected the icon that was missing or that was fat finger wrong. What else we need to do? Let's limit how many get displayed. Now this is really cool. This is where you start to add parameters. To me, I think this is the game changer. Other than some of the other stuff, like the separation of the HTML from the actual logic versus jQuery, I think that's a game changer for Angular. I think that's one of the key reasons why they go with Angular. So now the designer can go back, change all this HTML, give us a new markup, give us a new CSS and all this other good stuff. We can come up here and make our updates and adjustments, and we're good to go. Right? We don't have to go in there and find the jQuery methods, finagle the HTML and all this other good stuff, or the selectors and all this other good stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think that Angular is a really good match for this type of development within SharePoint. The other piece is the parameters that you get when you're using the component model with AngularJS. And let's go ahead and delete this. Let's clear this out. And basically, what this will allow us to do is keep this stuff clean. If we go into our component where we have job categories, we have the title, and we're not using that, but I can show you how instead of that hard-coded browse job categories, we can allow the user, the content manager, to pass in whatever category they want. Another thing we can do is allow them to pass in the count, right? And this is going to come in as a string, even though we're going to use it. It seems like it should be an integer, right? So this is going to pass in as a string, and basically with the count, we could then pass this guy to our service, control.count, and then go to our services and say, okay, they're going to send in a max count parameter, and very simply pass that into our query string parameter using the OData syntax for top, and that's going to be our count plus max count, right? And that's that. And another thing we can do is if the count is not specified, so if not max count, then set it equal to an arbitrary value. And in our case, we'll do, how many we display in a row? I want to keep this thing even by default. Okay, so let's just default it to 4 if they don't specify anything. Max count equals 4, right? Save this off. What did we change? Component and the services. So let's push that up. All right, so now we go here, hit refresh. The expectation is that we get 4. Right, so now we have 4. But the control is now inside of the content manager's hands. So now what we can do is go over here, edit, go into the script editor, and whatever we define in the bindings section of our component is the name that will be here. And of course, everything's lowercase. So count equals, let's just do 2. Insert, save and edit. Oh, that's not working right. Huh, thought we said 2 here. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't matter if you're using Chrome or not. But for digging, I prefer Chrome. Okay. Something did not wire up correctly. Okay, so let's look at this guy. Did I fat finger something? Browse job. So this is our template. Oh, you can't see the component from here. Let's go into our code. Let's see here. Count. Control.count. Job categories, right? And then services. So if not max count equals 4. This part is working, but the user piece is not working. Oh, sometimes it is simple as a control F5. Is it that? Let's see. Control F5, scroll down, take a look. Nope, we're still 4. Something is not wired up correctly. Let's do a console read. This is like your alerts. So let's console.log. Count coming in is all right. So we expect to see this readout. Let's just make sure that the 2, because we're on 2 now, right? We specified 2. All right, hit refresh, and this is going to be in our console chunk here. Count coming in is undefined. All right, that's our problem. Why is it undefined though? All right. They seem to be the same. I don't know why the bindings is not working here. All right, let me play around with this one and see if I can figure out why this is not the case. All right, so let me get back with you on the next video. We'll start this one out. I'll figure this one out. If you figure it out before I do, hit me up in the comments. But for the most part, other than this user, this parameter here, right, to allow the user to specify the count, we're losing. Oh, let me just double check something. This is going to bother me now. Let me just make sure we spelled this right. You probably already seen the answer, and it's like, oh yeah, Deshaun, you fat fingered that. All right, so browse jobs, count equals 2. Nope. I don't know. All right, I'll look into it. I'll let you know. We'll figure it out. But that's it. That's how you get the REST API working inside the SharePoint using Angular. And once we get the parameter piece of the count working as we expected, you will see how we can then specify different attributes on our tag to really control the functionality for a particular component. All right, until the next video, we'll get that one piece figured out, and then we'll look at converting more of these different features in SharePoint and REST API.